What the other thing I really respected, I'm sort of shifting gears a bit, but the other thing I really respected about you was your openness about talking about addiction,
Oh yeah.
just as someone who understands, you know, I- like my tendency towards addiction and those things. How has sobriety allowed your creative juices to sort of develop or your creativity to flourish?
Man, it's the most important part of who I am, you know? It's like the crux of everything rests
Exactly,
on
right?
that, you
Yeah.
know? I'm really anywhere I am in life is because of that. It's still, excuse me, it's still look, I still go to meetings. I still am very active in recovery stuff. I'm always willing to talk to people about it. And yeah, it's
Mhm.
just, it's been 14 years. I do anything and everything, like that I want, but like that's in the top most priority, you know.
Yeah, I think
I thought
you
you were
know,
going to ask, so like, how does your sobriety impact episode 9 of Daily Points?
no,
Okay, because it
that
was so
would have been a
it's
little bit that, yeah, no, just because I myself have dealt with certain
oh okay.
issues related to addiction, and I think just becoming sober has just made me, it's allowed me to listen better. It's just
Oh, congrats,
allowed
man!
me.
I didn't know we had that.
Yeah, so I was, it's really difficult to openly speak about these issues because I've seen so many friends go through this. And I think having a good support network, but also the internal battle of actually
Yeah,
getting out of the habit, right, is
yeah,
just sort of so difficult.
yeah.
Um,
And it looks different for different people. Look, like my thing might not work for you know you or
yeah.
but yeah.
Was there anything did you I know you've talked about it from your perspective, but in terms of the community or you grew up in or just your family or anything, did they react at all when you began openly speaking about these things?
Yeah, I mean, my family has been my biggest support. It was definitely a rough few years. My childhood was not fun for either me or them. If you want to know more of the gory details, I actually made a whole podcast about it called King of the
Yeah,
World,
yeah, yeah. Uh-huh,
and I was very lucky to have them all on there and stuff. Um,
uh-huh.
but yeah, man, I mean, without my family, and the cool thing is, like, I think it's empowered them in the sense that, like, my mom started a mental health group, or she helped start a mental health group at the masjid.
That's amazing.
People from the community will, know that I'm someone that knows about this stuff. So they're, more often than not, they'll suggest
Yeah.
that their kids talk to me. And I'm always like, I'll talk, if they want to talk to me, I'm totally down. Like, I'm not like gonna like
Yeah.
narc them out or, but,
Yeah, no,
yeah.
no, that's amazing. I think that
And I hope it's getting easier to talk about now. I think even in the zeitgeist, it's more common now. Like, we all know somebody that this is all of us. I think it's not a stretch to say that it impacts all of us in some way, whether directly or indirectly, however many degrees removed. So I hope it's becoming um, more of like a normal thing to talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think having that, it's not just your health, but I think for me it was just a mental clarity and emotional clarity that I don't really need to be dependent on a substance or anything like that to have a good time, and
Yeah.
I think I don't know,
I have this.
yeah.
I have this really good friend. His name is Zishan, and this reminds me of about 8 years ago, before the Kominas. We were about to go on what would be one of our last tour of Europe, and that night we were at this, just sort of like, we had played a concert in New York, and we were at some party afterwards, and we're out like dancing till 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. And my friend Zishan turns to me and he's like, "Bro, like, do you realize, like, it's just so cool that you're here with us, and you're not even like." Like, we're all drinking and stuff, and you're not. I'm like, and the coolest part to me was that, like, I hadn't even thought about it, and it had been, by that point, it had been eight, whatever, 8 years or something, or
That's
6 years,
amazing.
but like, just stuff like that. So yeah, I mean, I don't know, it was just a little tangent there, but it reminded me
Yeah.
of what you were saying.
No, I totally, yeah, I think that's the hardest thing, right? Like peer pressure and, sort of being in an environment where
It just takes
there's,
time, man. It takes time to reframe. And look, I had to take myself out, the first year or two. Like, I didn't go to stuff. I didn't go to concerts. I just went to meetings. But then, like, at some point, if you work on yourself or if you're able to tackle it, like it just, the framework changes. Like people ask me all the time, like, well, how do you like play in bands and like go to bars and, or in the case of Deli Boys, like do fake drugs on screen? Like it's just, it doesn't hold the same place. And it's not something that I can tell. Like it just took time, man. It took years and years to get to that place where it's just not, it's not that I never think about it, but I just don't really in that way. Like I've played the tape through enough times, but also like I've had so many greater experiences and understandings of myself beyond any of that,
Yeah.
and it's like there's a saying in recovery where it's like, you just have to give up this one thing and then you can do a million other things. It's just one thing and it seems like the most important thing and it seems like you'll never be able to like do anything, but then you can do everything and you just had to give up that one thing.
Yeah. So shifting into your musical projects, a little bit about what you're listening to nowadays and how, where's your like musical interest going, in terms of your work and those sort of things.
Yeah, man, a great question. So the track I'm actually currently obsessed with is Arooj Aftab and Krungbin have a song together,
Wow.
which yeah, they read. So it's a version of Arooj's song Raat Ki Rani. Arooj is also a very old dear friend of mine. Um,
Yeah.
and so Krungbin specifically, I love that band because of their kind of like, I'm obsessed with reverby guitars. If anybody who knows me will know this about me. So in terms of guitar tone and stuff, like I'm really into that. The current
What's it
band I'm
about what's it about the reverb guitar
You
that
know, it's
you
that's a great question. It has this like so I'm also producing a podcast currently about Karachi in the 1970s and the bands from that era.
the
Um,
whole like surf punk bands and
exactly. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's a project that I've had in some form for 15, 20 years. Um,
Mhm.
but and my co-host Tanya is actually the daughter of one of the band members in the band The Abstracts. So there were these bands like The Abstracts, the Panthers, the Mods,
Yeah.
and these guitar tones are essentially they're like old, it's old 50s, 60s, 70s kind of sound. And whether it's I'm a very nostalgic person, so that's a huge element of that for me. So that's kind of like been, and whereas I think, and I'm also really into like heavy music and stuff, obviously with my history with Kominas and all that. But so the band I play with is called Ravi Shavi. I play with a few artists, but Ravi Shavi is the main one. They're based out of Providence. And in particular, one of the front person of Ravi Shavi is Rafi Rashid, Pakistani kid like me from Providence. We're just dear friends, and I joined the band 3 4 years ago. I've known them for about 12 years now. We kind of started touring together, Ravi Shavi and Kominas back in the day. And then me and Rafe have just become like musical buddies and friends. And so we
Yeah.
have a bunch of other like kind of side projects. I'm also playing guitar lately with a friend of mine, Sunny Singh he's, a lot of people know him from the band Red Bharat, but he has
Mhm.
a pretty big solo career as well. So I've been kind of I'm one of the many musicians he kind of plays with. So
Mhm.
with him, I actually started even playing rabob a little bit,
Oh wow.
and harmonium and stuff. And then actually, the Delhi Boys creator Abdullah and myself and Abdullah's older brother Ahmed, we have a project called Gods, where the S is with a dollar sign. So
That's
if you
so
you look up
awesome.
like God, if you write out the whole word God dollar
Yeah.
sign dot bandcamp.com, basically, and it's like a file sharing project almost, where we just like come up with a riff or he comes up or somebody comes up with like a beat and we send it to each other, and the idea is to just throw something down and not think too hard about it. We have like five
Mhm.
albums. I don't think anybody really is listening to it other than us, but it's kind of for us. So man, look, music is always going to be something I do. I'm
Yeah.
always doing that kind of
So
stuff.
so where do you think like sound is going nowadays? I think like we're
Dude, that's
entering
such a good question, man.
like a post-punk phase. I feel like that era
I
of
mean, the 90s are
deindustrialized.
back, dude. Like, I think,
Oh,
yeah,
interesting.
I mean, I think, another one of my favorite records. Now, this is a few years old now, but there's this band Turnstile.
Hmm.
They have this record called Glow On, and and actually my bandmate from Kominas, Basim, has been a huge fan of Turnstile from way before. They're a
Yeah.
hardcore band, but this record that they put out in, I want to say 2021 or 2022, uh, is just such a like riff heavy, almost like glammy thing, and it's just like, so I think music has this way of like whatever was cool 30 years ago is like kind of, like what
Yeah.
like young people are into or whatever. So for me, look, I'm 41. So the 90s was, when I was a kid. So like all that stuff like Deftones and Weezer and like Smashing Pumpkins and
Yeah.
Pixies and these things. And like kids are into that now. I mean, also there's, look, I'm really into like Bad Bunny. I love Bad Bunny. I like
Bad
cumbia
Bunny.
music. I like all sorts of different things. So I think it's just, there are still bands and there are still musicians and groups. And I think it's just maybe the way that people consume music is a little bit different. I think that's the harder part for folks like me, maybe because I'm older now. But I don't know. I try to keep up with the youngins. Uh,
Yeah.
the value of an album versus like a single or like a piece of content, like in Spotify or whatever, throw, algorithms and things like I'm sure have an impact on how we do stuff. But then people just like make their own shit.
Yeah.
So there's always going to be like a counter to the main thing, So that part I don't think will ever change. I think the live performance specifically is something I think that will always be there unless people really want to see holograms. Myself as a sort of tangentially another source of income for me is
We'll
voice.
probably have both.
Yeah, yeah, or like gorillas. I mean, they did that, but another source of income for me is voiceover, right? And that's being taken over by AI very hard. I
Yeah,
do audiobooks and things,
I
and
tried like the text to voiceover on this, right? And
yeah,
it was kind of hilarious. Like it was like my voice, but it was like white me voice, but it was like not me, like
yeah.
it was just like it would be like so I was trying to make this thing on this like Indian philosopher Ambedkar, and it was like I'm bad car,
Oh, nice.
like,
I mean,
and I was
it'll
like,
probably get better soon, though, man. That's the scary part. So I don't know.
yeah. I mean, yeah, yeah, yeah. It's gonna. So with Ravi Shavi, what's your tour schedule like? Are you guys
We're
performing
working on a
anytime?
new album right now, and we're planning on doing a little bit of touring. It's not as heavy of a touring band as Kominas was.
Yeah,
Um, And the thing, honestly, because all of the guys in that band are such prolific musicians, they all have a million other projects. So, but we do gig a lot in Providence, and I said New England. That band has Ravi Shavi's never been to the West Coast, or they've done random things like gigged in China. It's museum openings or whatever.
that's awesome.
So, but we want to do some tours, and I'm really excited to be on a Ravi Shavi album. I haven't yet. I've been with the band now 3 or 4 years, so I'm really looking
Okay.
forward to actually like sitting and recording. I haven't like
Yeah.
recorded an album with a band since Kominas in 2016, 17. So it's been a while. Yeah.
Are you guys gonna do something together? Like Basim, you guys like
Yeah, so it's
Kamina?
funny. So Kominas actually, we had it's hard to believe our 20-year reunion gig this past December, and we had
Oh
so
shit.
much fun. Yeah, a friend of ours actually in the UK is restarting his label, so there's a chance that you might be hearing some stuff from Kominas soon. So
That
it's
is amazing.
yeah.
That is some big news because
Yeah, we've got, it's not, we've got
I think like Kominas was the first like brown band, which was like a movement, right? Like there
yeah,
was like Janoon or something like that, but
sure.
that was like a different style of music, kind of,
And that was
right?
Pakistan, I think American
Yeah,
South Asia,
but
sure.
I mean like from the grassroots, like that sort of band, which was like
Yeah.
a
It's really,
movement.
dude, we're all very fortunate. It's so cool to be part of something that you can kind of just go back to. We're all friends.
Yeah,
And it's not that hard. Like in a day, we can rehearse and we can just be tight again, and that's really cool to have that in your back pocket.
yeah.
So we definitely are not going to be like we're not hopping back into it full time by any means, but we all really love playing with each other. So I think when the opportunities present themselves, I'm sure we'll be doing some more stuff.
How have the music venues changed? Like just being in New England, uh, in this area, like the East Coast,
Yeah, dude,
like
it's a
from
just like anything else, the music
is it
industry
getting
is suffering
gentrified?
for yeah, for sure, dude. I mean, old small clubs have closed here and there, definitely here.
Yeah,
It's a similar thing is happening in Providence. Like the big companies are taking over, kind of like corporatizing things. But again, scenesters will always find their way. So there's a thriving DIY scene, and like there's
yeah,
people are doing stuff. So that I'm not worried about that in that sense.
yeah, definitely. Like I think that's what I see. I think like Boston has changed a lot. I
Yeah.
mean,
One of my
Or,
favorite bands that we sort of came up together, and now they're quite big. A rock band called Pile. They're from Massachusetts, and they're
yeah.
really I'm very very close. With the singer and I went to high school together and stuff. And this is another band that just start basement shows and relentless touring, and they're still at it. All these years later, they just signed a new record contract. They put out an album every year. They tour relentlessly still. So like they're still making it happen, so that kind of stuff really inspires me.
Are record companies like functioning in the same way? Are there like more
So
local?
I've never been. It's like Kominas were never signed to any label or anything, so I don't
Oh,
understand too much of the workings of that stuff. But
yeah.
yes, they do exist. They are signing bands are touring. I think that there are still deals. I think it's different, but
But like
they
the local record label, like as one would say, I know like
They
National
they
had a
I mean they
lot
do. So
and
Ravi Shavi, for example, is on a small label called Almost Ready Records,
Almost Ready.
based out of Brooklyn. They're more of they don't, again, they're like a indie label. But yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
band, there are still big band. One of my favorites in recent memory, Peter Cat Recording Company from India, from Delhi, and
Mhm.
also his Surya's other project, Lifafa. I mean, they're just hitting their stride, and they've done this massive. They just did a massive headline tour in the U.S. and stuff. So I mean, it's still happening as far as I can see. It's
Yeah,
just yeah,
yeah. Yeah, I wonder like yeah, I feel like the late 90s and early 2000s, maybe I'm nostalgic. Like I just remember going to a lot of punk shows,
sure.
like, and there were like
I
venues
mean,
and like
I was supposed to. It's funny. If I hadn't
there
helped
was
my
like
mom
Warped
today,
Tour as well,
well,
like
yeah, yeah. If I'd helped,
but they got canceled.
for sure. If I if I had been a bad son and bailed on my mom, a friend had invited me to a house show today here up in Salem, Mass. A friend of mine, Enrique, he plays with this
You
band
can't bail on them
He's the
all.
singer now for that band La Armada, and they were
Oh
here.
wow.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, these things are still going on.
No, this is interesting. Yeah, this is great news to hear that, Kominas might be producing an album and you're gonna be also on
Not an
the
album,
Ravi
but
Shav.
maybe a few. We might be putting out a couple songs. So
Yeah, that would
yeah,
be like amazing. I mean, like you guys were
yeah.
like a
I hope
movement
it
back
all.
in
I
the
hope it all
day.
happens. Thank you.
Uh,
And
like
that means
and
so much to me, man, that like people,
yeah,
that's the coolest part about it, is that, all these years later, you know,
and
it meant
yeah,
something
like
to somebody.
yeah, like I think like it's just important that quality music comes out and the music continues. And I think like for me, thank you for taking out time for this
Yeah,
interview
man. Thank you for having me.
and I just wanted to emphasize like many congrats on Delhi Boys and
Thank you so much.
Aftermath.